My name's James Rea, and I have started a new company in Belfast called Belfast Bohemian Productions. It began launched in June this year, 2009, and our first production is a documentary short film about the history of Belfast called Belfast Birth of a City. The Birth of the City project began last year. My good friend Joe Curran, who is a local historian and an ex-teacher, used to take tours of Belfast on the buses, and he used to go up the Shankill Road and the Falls Road and go to the Titanic Quarter and all the usual places. And people used to always ask about the Troubles and about Titanic and all of that. But now and again, he used to get questions about how did Belfast begin? You know, what was the history prior to all of that? And Joe really didn't have an enormous understanding of that, so he started doing some research. And as he started doing the research, he got very excited about the story that started to develop. Through talking to me, then obviously we decided, well, let's see if there is actually a product out there that sort of gives the history of Belfast, because it's the capital of Northern Ireland, and you would have thought that, you know, we're here in the capital city, that people could get history in this way. So Joe and I went around the usual places, the tourist information centres, and a lot of the shops to see if we could find a history film of Belfast about this particular period in our history. There is books, of course, but there was nothing that we could find that was actually a film or a documentary or anything like a historical programme. So we thought, why not do one ourselves? Because Joe's an expert in communication in terms of describing history and making it sound fun and exciting. And I'm a sort of creative person, sort of like music and guitars and drawing and things like that. And although we'd never made anything before, we thought we'll give this a go and see how we get on. So since May last year, right through until May this year, we went about making our very first short film, and that was Belfast Birth of a City. If you go to our website, which is www.belfastbohemians.com, there's a section there where you can see all the locations of where you can actually buy it at the moment. And we hope to have it available online later this year as well.
The clues to the origins of Belfast are hidden in its name. Belfast is the English form of the older Irish Belfasta, meaning the approach to the sandbank crossing. Since their arrival in Ulster 8,000 years ago, groups of humans have travelled in search of food and shelter, for trade and for war.
Initially it was trying to be aimed towards the tourist market, people who were visiting Belfast, because that's where we thought that would be fitting in very well. But as we started to meet people and describe what we were trying to do, we found that there's a really, really strong interest from local people, especially because most local people, when they look at the history, they think of the Troubles, they think of the linen manufacture, and they think of the Titanic and things like that. But we were surprised that most people that we met in our journey over the last year didn't have a big understanding about the early history of the city. And when we told them what we discovered in terms of the research, they got really excited. So we then realised that it's going to be local people will have a definite interest in our story, as well as the visitors and the people who come to Belfast. What I found through obviously Joe Curran, who obviously wrote the script and presented and narrated the documentary, my role was really to present it visually. But the exciting things that we, in terms of the story that we told, is we found out things like how Ulster got its name, how Belfast got its name, how many of the early streets in Belfast that are still here today got their names. So these were the sort of things that we were excited about, where the original Belfast Castle was, for example. Because most people imagine that Belfast Castle is the castle that we all know today that's up at the Antrim Road. But in fact, the original Belfast Castle was actually located in the city centre. It's just near the Corn Market area. And the minute we were telling people about this, is the sort of, you know, where the original Belfast Castle was, and it alludes to where they were because of the street names, things like Castle Street, Castle Junction. These are all reverberations of where the original castle was. So those sorts of things were instrumental in getting a story that maybe most people would understand and have an interest in as we told it on screen.
To the south of the crossing, on the Lagan's western bank, lay the wide mouth of the Blackstaff River.
It's the earliest possible period in history. So we talk about prehistory, which is the Celts, the Normans, when basically there was nothing here in what we now know as Belfast except forests and wild boar and wolves and very, very primitive settlements. So we take it from that period where we go through the centuries with the Anglo-Normans, the Celts, the Vikings, right up to the year 1801. So it really pretty much covers 6,000 years of history. Obviously, when you're covering such a wide period in time, we obviously, otherwise the DVD would have lasted, 6 hours or something like that. what we tried to do was to pick out all the key points in the history of the city that most people will find fascinating and interesting. But we put it against a historical background of what was happening in terms of the lineage of the periods in time as we go through the centuries. So that was pretty much the period that we tried to cover. So it's 6,000 years from prehistory, prehistoric Belfast, right through until the year 1801. And we've described that as part one of the story, because Belfast became a city in the year 1888. But from 1801, where this one ends, to 1888 is where roughly the Victorian period happened, and that's where an even bigger story happened then. And we're going to save that for the next DVD that we're going to do, which is surprisingly called Belfast Birth of a City Part 2.
The Celtic tribes and petty kingdoms fought as ever, over land and over cattle.
Personally, what I enjoyed was the fact that we were doing reenactments because there were certain periods in the history where visually we had to show it in a very strong way. We had to do documentary style drama reenactments where we had our friends and family dressed up in period costume, and although there was no dialogue, it was just there to support a certain part of the script. So I really enjoyed that aspect of it, where we had to do the makeup and the hair and renting out the costumes, you know. And the support that we had in terms of the friends and family was enormous too, because they gave up their time completely free of charge, of course, to show something. And it really adds to the production, because a lot of documentary short films, you know, they have a certain style to them. And what we tried to do, because we were new to even making a documentary, was to try and put something in that keeps everyone's interest. So we have a lot of visual stimulus, maps and paintings, as well as obviously these documentary reenactments, which I enjoyed most, where we went around the country in different parts to film Lord Mayor scenes, and we have people up and down the old entries of Belfast dressed in period costume and wigs. The Grand Opera House in Belfast, for example, were very kind. They allowed us to film a couple of shots inside one of the boxes with obviously our relatives sort of reenacting a little theatre scene and so on. So those sorts of things I enjoyed most, because you got a chance to get out and be on location and shout the word action, which was great, because I've never directed before, and that was a blast. It was something that a lot of the roles were not sort of, I will want to do this and I want to do that, and they just happened because there was no one else to do them. But I think that overall the production is a very strong piece of work for our first time, and we're very excited about the next documentary, because there's so much that we've learnt in this short film that I think is going to carry through to the next one. There's a lot of much more exciting ideas, and we're going to expand out, you know, some of the skills that we've learnt in the last 12 months.
The appearance of elegant, stylish Georgian houses showed how the linen merchants and the growing middle class were starting to spend their newfound wealth.
There was two big challenges. The first being, of course, that we had never made a short film before. So all the technical aspects of the camera work and directing and all those aspects we had never done before. Because I knew that we had a good story to tell. I knew that Joe had read a great script, and the pieces to camera that Joe did over the course of the filming were so strong that the skills that were there to try and back up and to visually represent what the story was a big challenge, because, you know, we'd never done it before. But I think that through the support of the friends and family, and also a lot of the organisations around Belfast that helped, allowed us to give us permission to film, for example, they really did help us to show something on screen which was not only professional looking, but also told the story well. For our first time, as I say, it was a great achievement whenever we finished it and we got it edited and got it completed. It was the fact that at the back of it that I knew that we had very amateurish equipment. We had no experience in filmmaking before, but at the end of it, when you see the end product, it was very, very strong, and it's something that both myself and also Joe is very, very proud of.
For all but the wealthiest, dawn and dusk were the opening and closing times for trade, business and leisure.
We didn't get any funding at all. It was purely through Joe Curran, the writer, narrator, presenter. His own personal investment was made this happen. And in terms of the cost of it, it was so small. In terms of what normally it takes to produce things like this, a few £1,000, and that was it. But out of necessity, you know, is creativity sometimes, and because we were so limited in terms of the budget, we had to show things on screen as creatively as we could. So although we didn't have the money to do lavish production, I think we obviously did the best that we could with the resources that we had, you know.
With the century's end in sight, the glorious revolution of 1688 pitted the Catholic King, James II, against his Protestant son-in-law, William of Orange.
A lot of people have conceived ideas about how big the town was, I realised how small it was. A few hundred people, a few thousand people, right up until the Victorian period. There wasn't that. The population of Belfast was relatively small, and it was only when we go into the next stage of the storytelling, which is the next DVD, plug, that we realised how the city suddenly exploded in terms of the economic and social development of the town. Really takes place within that period of the 1800s right up to 1901. That's whenever the city just exploded. In fact, it was known as the Monster Town.
From the middle of the 17th century, some familiar Belfast streets appear, creeping away from the lagoon.
Belfast Birth of a City, Part 2, the Victorian period, from 1801 to 1888. That's the next project. And as I say, it is that exciting period, as I say, with the shipbuilding, linen manufacture, the Great Irish Famine, and as I say, the famous visitors that have come. So I wanted to make it very similar in terms of the style of the Part 1, but Part 2 I think is going to be even more challenging in terms of the graphics, because I'd like to see 3D modelling of the old Belfast streets and how they transformed from then to now. I'd like to see some animation as well. And I want to use local musicians. I want to get in touch with and put the word out for anyone who's got a skill, an undiscovered talent, if you will, and wants to be part of something which is new to Belfast. As I say, there's never been a history documentary short film like this before, and obviously, thankfully, we've made it, and we've made it in a good way, and we're very, very proud of it. But the next one, I think, is going to be even bigger and even better than the first one. We hope to be making this new DVD, start filming later this year, so that it will be on release again early next year, around about May time.
In 1708, Belfast Castle accidentally burnt down, killing 3 sisters of the 4th Earl of Donegal.
Belfast is not only thriving in terms of economics at the moment, but also in terms of talent. And there's so many talented people within the media in terms of editors and writers and musicians and actors that only recently I've started to become aware of. So although I am a sole trader, and Belfast Bohemian Productions is a very small company, for the next production, anyone who wants to get involved with the next DVD, I'm going to welcome with open arms, because it's an exciting period of our history, but also exciting in terms of what I think that we can actually produce, because visually we were limited for the first production, but this next one, I think I want to use a lot more of local talent. So local musicians, actors, editors, graphic designers, anyone who feels that they can assist with this particular project is going to be welcomed with open arms as far as I'm concerned.